You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
When the news of Mayweather and McGregor being official came out, I immediately thought of you. I was like, okay, we need the boxing expert's perspective on this fight. Not just in terms of how much money it's going to make, because we already know it's huge, but what this means for both boxing and MMA as a whole.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because the history of Floyd Mayweather, and when it comes to boxing, since he beat Oscar De La Hoya all the way back in 2007 to kind of become Money Mayweather, it's really hard to measure his impact on the sport because outside of a rivalry with Manny Pacquiao, which actually helped both guys draw, it didn't really help anything else. Like it helped all the Floyd fights, him being that big of a star, but there wasn't really much of a trickle down effect on boxing as a whole. And I think that you can look back to Mayweather Pacquiao when that fight happened and did the most business any pay-per-view event has ever done. And like literally nothing else was helped from that. Like, so that fight didn't actually help the sport. It helped the pocketbooks of both guys, and it helped sort of create the idea that, you know, you could still market an event and make it like the one thing to do in the US on that specific day. Like you could still do that. And so as it relates to this fight, I still don't see how it really helps anything other than line Mayweather's pockets, and also, you know, move Conor McGregor into possibly a bigger role than he is currently as, you know, MMA's biggest star. Now there's some crossover appeal for him that will be gained here with this fight, but it doesn't really help the UFC. I'm not sure what Dana White gets out of this outside of he'll get a good piece of cash there just to be the co-promoter. But as far as McGregor is concerned, I feel, and I don't know any which way or the other, but I feel like McGregor's demands on wanting to do this were probably the reasons that Dana decided to go ahead and do it, which is, you know, if I don't let this guy fight, maybe he never fights in the UFC and he tries to somehow get out of his contract, which isn't good. And maybe if I do let him fight, maybe I can get him to agree to fight, you know, once more late in December and, you know, maybe another time after that. But I mean, really, when McGregor comes out of this, you know, 50 million or 75 million or whatever he's going to earn, you know, richer, does he even come back to the UFC? That's kind of the question that I'm wondering. But I think Dana kind of had to cater to, to make sure that he still had a chance to bring McGregor back to the UFC, even if it's only for one fight or so.
You know, that's a point I've also heard raised by John Pollock over on the Live Audio Wrestling Podcast Network is, can McGregor still be counted on to deliver for UFC after this? If he walks away with anywhere between 50 and 100 million for one fight and they offer him 10 to 20 million for his next UFC fight, why would he come back and fight for less money in UFC if he's already banking that much off boxing?
Yeah, that's the question. And I originally, like, when the rumors started to get much louder that this was actually going to take place, I thought, you know, if I'm Dana White, I don't really care about blowing up my own pay scale, but I may change it just to cater to McGregor here. And maybe I say, hey, Conor, you know, we'll tear up your contract, and for these next 3 fights, or let's say 4 fights, you will make guaranteed 40 million or something like that. And then you get the increases based on your pay-per-view numbers, which, you know, could maybe double that contract or something. Because the bottom line is that without Conor, the UFC shows are all mostly driven by the hardcores as far as who's buying them. They haven't really had a big show, and I think, you know, I think the true test is going to be this John Jones and Daniel Cormier number, because if they do, I I don't know, 500,000 or less. Like, it just shows, like, even with two of their top guys, unless it's Conor or, you know, in her heyday, Ronda Rousey, like, no one really cares. And that's unfortunate because they have so many good fighters on their brand. You know, it's like, I think pro wrestling and MMA are actually kind of parallel in this way, in that there are no real draws in WWE or in the UFC, but you have so many good wrestlers and good fighters that are exciting, but because their personalities don't really connect mainstream, you know, not too many people are able to watch, and so it kind of sucks because the popularity in both sports right now is fairly down.
Yeah, and that's something that Peter and I talked about on last week's show with the whole Demetrius Johnson situation in UFC right now, is arguably, pound for pound, one of the best fighters in the world, and certainly near the top of the rankings in UFC on their own official list, yet he does so little business on pay-per-view and does so little connection with their audience when they have shows on Fox that Dana White and WME IMG can basically bully him around right now and say, yeah, you might be the greatest ever, but you're not that important to our business.
And it really is unfortunate because I think, to some extent, the UFC is more in the right than Demetrius is. And it's, the reason why it's unfortunate is because I feel like, and there's just something with the way fighters think, in that they look at Mayweather and they go, wow, why can't I make 30 or 50 million? And what they don't understand is that these boxers who they are like comparing themselves to, like, for instance, Andre Ward, I think he made $6.5 million for his fight against Sergey Kovalev. And the Diaz brothers would always compare themselves to Andre Ward and like, oh wow, you know, Andre Ward makes X million, and you know, we're earning, you know, 300,000 plus, you know, another 300,000 if we win. The fact of the matter is that Nate Diaz actually made more money than Andre Ward in his last fight with Conor McGregor. And it didn't have anything to do with boxing versus UFC. It had everything to do with Nate's leverage to negotiate a good contract for himself for that fight. It's not about sport necessarily. If you have a name and you are a draw and you are somebody who is interesting to people, you have leverage and you can create some, you know, negotiating power. Demetrius Johnson doesn't really seem to care about that. He thinks that, you know, he seems to care more about that he's just great, which he is, and that should be celebrated in of itself, but it doesn't necessarily relate to fans in a way that, you know, someone like Manny Pacquiao was able to. And you think about it, and it's like, well, Demetrius, you know, walking around weight, you know, Pacquiao's probably like 10 or 15 pounds heavier than Demetrius, but they're both small men. But Pacquiao's ability to resonate with people, to fight in not only a fashion in which he wins, you know, 98% of his fights, but do it in a way that excites people. That's the part that DJ doesn't understand, or maybe he understands and just knows that that's just not the way he wants to do it. But like, it's literally about the leverage that you have in how much money you make based on how much people enjoy watching you. Like, that's literally what it is. And I don't understand when these guys make it about something else.
I think it's fair to say that if you look at Mayweather's, I think at least last 6, maybe last 7 fights in a row, they've all been fights that go to a decision. So if you're looking for Mr. Excitement in terms of knockouts, that's not why you buy a Floyd Mayweather pay-per-view. Buy a Floyd Mayweather pay-per-view because he is an incredible promoter and hype machine and creates this gigantic swirl all around him that draws people to him the same way that Conor McGregor does in the sport of mixed martial arts. And that's why this crossover event has so much appeal for everybody, is because these two possess a charisma that is seldom seen by anybody else in their respective sport.
Yeah, and you buy a Floyd Mayweather pay-per-view also because you want to see if he's going to lose. Like, he created this aura of being unbeatable, and throwing it in everybody's face. And so part of the reason was like, well, I just want to be there when he finally loses. And he just never lost. The other thing about this, and this is what's going to be interesting to me about this show. So from what I've heard, the folks who put this fight together believe 5 million pay-per-view buys is what they're shooting for.
At $100 a head.
At $100 a head. So that even beats Mayweather-Pacquiao, which killed the prior record, like almost doubled it, right?
Yes.
So this is a hefty, hefty goal. And so I wonder, and this is all based on what the guarantee is, right? So if you think about how this works, Floyd Mayweather wasn't going to write his name on the contract unless he was guaranteed X amount of money, because the risk that he puts out there is if they miscalculate the market and he takes a lower guarantee, it's sort of like a failure in that sense. But I never expected him to take a low guarantee. So if he did, I'd really be surprised. But for him, I think the way that he was going to put his name on the contract was if he got the guarantee that he wanted, and you know, whether it is 30 million or 50 million or whatever it was. So the thing about that and how that works is the higher Mayweather's guarantee, the less inspired he may be to market the fight, because if it doesn't matter to him if the fight does 2 million or 5 million, I really wonder how much he's going to put into it. Because you know Conor is going to put in everything he possibly has to drive this. But in the press conferences where Conor was so engaging and so entertaining, he needed a dance partner. Nate was a really good dance partner, and you know he was able to do great stuff with Nate because Nate engaged. What if Mayweather doesn't engage with Conor, knowing that more than likely Conor didn't get the same guarantee that Mayweather got, and probably his paycheck is probably more about the great business that they do? I just wonder if Floyd necessarily will dance with Conor, because I think that's what's going to have to happen in order to get this up to Mayweather-Pacquiao territory.